Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Planet Hog. And today, we're going to do things a little bit differently today. I know today's typically Friday Fun Day, but I'd be remiss not to talk about the second and final presidential debate that happened last night. So, it's going to hijack our Friday Fun Day today. So, I actually watched because I had to work last night. So I ended up watching it or listening to it on the way home. And then when I came in, I fired it up on the TV and watched it one more time just to kind of make sure I get everything that I wanted to see and make sure I have all the points that I wanted to talk about and make sure I'm representing both sides as fairly as I can. So, whew, the debate yesterday. Well, I think the overall opinion, the unanimous opinion, is it was a lot better than the first one, both in terms of the candidates being able to speak and articulate their points, and in terms of the opposing candidates allowing the time for their opponent to speak. So, as far as moderation, I know a lot of people are giving this lady credit for her job as a moderator. I'm not one of those people. I think a lot of the flow of the debate was because both President Trump and Joe Biden played by the rules that were set out, and it was I think obviously somebody got to somebody got to Donald Trump and told him, hey, just tone it down a little bit. You see what old Mike Pence did out there? How he cut Kamala up? Just go ahead and do that. So I think someone certainly got into his ear, which is a good thing because I like how he came across last night overall. There were a couple issues that I did not like his response to, and I'll get into those here in a second. But overall, I think this was a better look for President Trump. And again, I was trying to view him kind of hard for me to do. I was trying to view him as objectively as possible, trying to view him through the lens of someone who may not necessarily appreciate or be familiar with that brash, northeastern kind of bravura. So overall, I think it was a better product for someone who is still on the fence. And actually, at the time I'm recording this, I have not reached out. I know of two people who are still literally on the fence, which is amazing. It's almost like finding a unicorn, finding somebody who's on the fence politically. But I will end up reaching out to them later on today because their biggest, both actually, of their biggest objections to the president the first time around was his demeanor. Not necessarily the things he was saying, but it was his demeanor, how he came across. So I'm interested to see if what he did last night remedied those issues in their eyes. Excuse me. So, and I don't have my obligatory cup of all, but that'll be fine. I'm running a little bit behind schedule today, but that's fine. So, overall, I think that was what I attribute to the cohesion of the debate was both candidates abiding by the rules. I don't really give this moderator who, you know, deactivated her Twitter account long enough to scrub it of God knows what. We can only assume it was damning things, right? Because why would you delete a bunch of stuff and then reactivate it? So that was sketchy. I would have liked to have seen that person removed. It seems a tall task for us to find someone who can just be neutral. Uh, or, hey, I mean, if we're going to have all of these left leaning moderators, why not have at least one? I don't know, this is crazy. One right leaning moderator. So, I think she did a decent job of appearing to be neutral in the beginning, but towards the middle of the debate, as her interruptions of the president continued to ramp up, I was watching Fox and Friends earlier, and they had a tally of all the interruptions. I think the final, excuse me, the final interruption tally was 111 to 22, something crazy like that. So I think that it's kind of like Dexter. I don't know how many of you people watched that show Dexter on Showtime. But there was a season. I think it was the season when he ended up with like Rita, and he was doing the whole dad family thing. But there was a point in that season where he's quoted as saying, "My mask is slipping," and he was basically talking about how he's a serial killer and he wants to go kill people, but he's trying to play Mr. Good Guy, and it's just fatiguing him. And I felt that looking at the debate moderator. Let me pull her name. I'm tired of saying her name like that. Kristen Welker. There it is. So I felt that looking at her and listening to her as the debate kind of wore on. I think she did as best as could be expected from someone who spent the holidays with the Obamas. But I think obviously we're still a far cry away from neutrality, and I don't understand why that's so hard to secure, at least just for one of these debates. So I don't really give her too much credit because, again, I still feel as though the fix was in. It's just that Donald Trump has, through dealing with a often pugnacious and obnoxious media, Donald Trump has kind of strengthened himself. He's kind of become a master at fighting off multiple verbal assailants at once. And then, of course, you can take that and add to that his personality, his background as a business mogul, all these things. But I think what they have ended up doing is creating a more deadly opponent in Donald Trump by him constantly, like I said, having to defend himself and contend against multiple media assailants. So I think because he's so good at that, it kind of looks like she was less biased than she really was. I actually think she was the most biased moderator we had. The other lady, I didn't actually watch the other one, the town halls. I don't really count those. They weren't really debates, even though he did end up contending with her, that other lady, pretty heavily as far as I have heard. So now on to the challenger, right? In this corner, standing 5'9" because of scoliosis and osteoporosis, Joseph Biden. So, okay, Joe Biden. It's hard for me to give him a compliment. It's very hard for me to compliment him because I hate everything that he stands for. It's hard for me to give this man a compliment because all of my compliments are going to come across as backhanded kind of jabs, and they are. So the best compliment I can give him is he is a very smooth politician. I will give him that. He's very good at playing on people's emotions. And I'm so glad that President Trump called him out on that. Finally called him out on that when he was like, you're always trying to, something along the lines of like, you're creating a story about everybody sitting around the table and this, and that. You look in the camera, and I thought that was great that he called him out for being a politician. I thought that was wonderful, great strategy. Because when you don't call this out, the people in the middle can kind of delude themselves into thinking that this man actually cares, which I think is a mistake. Because as the president so eloquently put it, you've been doing this for 47 years. Not only that, prior to these last 3 and some change, you had 8 full years and did nothing. So I think we can dispel and dispense with any notion that this man cares more than our current president, despite the fact that that's the story that they try to weave. So yeah, there's that. He's a good snake oil salesman. He's a good dodger of questions. Now, granted, he's got a whole media apparatus that's working for him, to include social media. He's got a lot of things in his corner, which I think he needs at this point because if the media were anything resembling neutral, he'd be in a lot of trouble. I think he might have had a breakdown by now, especially with all of the scandal laden information we're getting as of late. So moving on to that, I would like to talk now a little bit about, one of the major issues I had in terms of President Trump and one of his responses, and I I can understand the counter argument to this before I even say it, that he's got to play the game, but I just don't like that. I don't like that. I think he does not have to play the game. I would argue against that because that's why, in fact, he was voted in the first time. Is that he's an outsider. He did a good job of enunciating that point as well. But a lot of these questions, granted, he was dealing with a lot of very slanted questions. President Trump, why are you so terrible? Why don't you care about people? Joe Biden, isn't President Trump terrible? So he was dealing with a little bit of that. Okay, great. But a lot of those questions, there were two in particular. One was COVID. Another was, I believe it was the question when they shifted towards climate change and people, and it was about energy. A lot of them were framed through the lens of race for whatever ungodly reason. But we know the reason, and it is ungodly. No, but we know the reason. It's because that's the game that the left plays. These are the most racialized, race conscious people. It is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's funny that they're so quick to call the president racist and people who just genuinely don't want to talk about it racist when they're literally, that's everything out of their mouth is framed through, oh, this is my POC co-host. Oh, this is the first woman of color. This is the first black so and so. It's annoying. It really is annoying. It really is annoying because in that vein, when you frame things that way, number one, it leverages the person listening to this person. It kind of forces you against criticizing this person, even if it's fair criticism, right? Because you're not criticizing just a moderator. You're criticizing a person of color, the first woman of color. So now that you've kind of painted that, now that we have that framework, anything you say can be misconstrued as racism because I made you aware of the person's race, even though that's something that you can perceive as long as you have two functioning eyeballs. So, excuse me, a little gassy. Ooh. So that's very annoying to me. To frame COVID through a racial lens, to me, is very panderish, and that's what these people do. So, okay. But it doesn't make it less annoying to me. It actually gets more and more annoying to me because people fall for this. And it's like, well, the COVID is affecting POCs more than non POCs, more than whites, which it's amazing to me that these people have allowed themselves to be referred to as colored again by the same party that instituted Jim Crow. But I digress. Probably not related, right? So naturally, the numbers are going to be higher. Let's just talk about black people. With black people, because black people live predominantly where? In cities. Most of America's metropolitan areas are where you find the highest concentration of black people. Well, if we learned anything about disease and how disease spreads, it spreads fastest in areas with lots of people. So it's not like the coronavirus is hunting down people of color. It's not like the way they try to point this, the way they try to frame this is as if either the disease itself is racist, or somehow there's some kind of medical prevention that is not being afforded to black people. So, it's annoying. It's really annoying. It's just mentally fatiguing to constantly hear these things framed through a racial lens that have zero to do with race. As a matter of fact, I think most people weren't very racist until 2020. I think 2020 is going to cause a resurgence in racism. And it's funny, right? Because on the one hand, you've got these people who are beating the drum of, oh, there's all this racism, there's all this systematic racism, there's all this, there's all that, while simultaneously implementing things that are very racist. University of Michigan Dearborn, for example, had a intentionally segregated student forum rally or whatever it was, where they can kind of discuss issues. You have California right now trying to repeal literal civil rights litigation that says you cannot discriminate based on skin color. They're actually trying to repeal that. So, and then you have obviously the legal system turning a blind eye to racial identity extremist groups that are on the left, like Black Lives Matter, while they continue to terrorize people and break shit and riot and make people bow down and make people kneel. So if I'm just, let's just say I am let's say I'm a white person watching all of this happen, while simultaneously I'm being told that I have some kind of privilege that I don't necessarily have because I work 9 to 5 just like you. I live right next door to you. You see my house. You see my car. So I'm a big believer that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So I think, there's been a lot of things put out into the atmosphere that will have repercussions that we just have not seen yet. But I'm digressing. Let me get back to the debate. It's just, I really hate to hear it's so annoying, and it's more annoying that people fall for this. It's more annoying that there aren't people on the left saying, why do we have to have COVID racialized? It's killing everybody. Oh, no, not really, but it's affecting everybody. So excuse me. So that was a little annoying. But I really wish that the president would have seized on that more when they were talking about COVID specifically. When we were talking about energy and these people living next to these, which, by the way, and again, this is my opinion, but I'm pretty sure you could tell by how smoothly Joe Biden answered that question. I would be willing to bet money he was tipped off on that question. Because if you go back and watch it, his answer is so smooth. He even had some kind of term about people. I forget what it's called, fence sitter or fence house or whatever. People who live in that area. A term I've never heard of before. Obviously, as I'm unable to reproduce it now. So that answer was just it jarred me how smoothly and seamlessly he answered that. So I think I'd be willing to bet he was tipped off on that one, right? They can't tip him off on the big ones. We'll throw you a small bone. So I really wish when they portrayed that and said, this disease that's affecting POCs, I really wish he would have stopped and redirected it. Whoa, no, it's affecting everybody. It affects everybody. I don't like when he allows them to force him to play their racial identity games. I don't like, and there was another question about when she talked about the talk, which, look, I'm not going to say that's not a real thing. Obviously, as a black male, it's part of. It is, to a certain extent, it is something that does take place. Now, we can argue the necessity of it, right? Because as I've said before in a previous podcast, the problems of yesterday are not necessarily the problems of tomorrow. To me, it's kind of like when I was in grade school, we still had the duck and cover drills. Even though, and for those of you who don't know, the duck and cover drills were supposed to be nuclear fallout drills for when you're at school. You get under a desk and you huddle your body close to itself because the desk will protect you. It was really just a vestige of the Red Scare during that era when Kennedy was in Bay of Pigs and Cuba, the nuclear missiles in Cuba and all that good stuff. that's really where it was necessary. That's really where it came from because there was a existential threat at that point. But in the 90s, there were no missiles in Cuba. In the 90s, we weren't on the brink of nuclear war. But we did it because, well, I don't know, that's kind of what we did back then. So we should probably continue it. We just mindlessly followed it. And to me, that's kind of where the talk lies. Do you have racist cops out there? Sure. Law of averages, right? But is it as pertinent now as it was during the time when my parents were younger? No. Is it as prevalent now as it was during the time my parents were younger? No. Just like the duck and cover drill, it's outlived its usefulness. So, especially now where you have an overcorrection, which we're very good at as a society, where we'll say, okay, well, that was a problem, so now we'll swing to the other side and not do anything. Where you have like Rashard Brooks, where he was able to physically best two cops after while being drunk or high on something. Sorry, unless you were high on crack, maybe PCP. I don't know. Definitely crack. You shouldn't be able to beat two cops. But I'm willing to bet, just like Jacob Blake, as a matter of fact, he was able to physically best two cops. I'm willing to bet he's able to physically best these cops because they're holding back because as soon as they show up to the scene, they're like, oh shit, it's a black dude and I'm white. So I just wish the president wouldn't play those racial games when they try to frame it that way. So that does bother me. Now, his answer, it was okay. Again, I just wish he would redirect the framing of the question and say, no, it's affecting everybody. Just because you people choose to see the world, you people being Democrats, choose to see the world through a racial lens in the name of not being racist, doesn't mean the rest of us do. Which it's kind of funny, the kind of ass backwards logic, right? It's the same ass backwards logic as, the whole cuties thing. That terrible movie on that Netflix is trying to defend, where they literally sexualize young girls in the name of we're raising awareness about this. We're criticizing it. Okay, but you can criticize it without doing it because once you do it, the criticism kind of falls away. It rings hollow because you're actually doing it. So, I mean, if that's the case, then shit, I'm gonna criticize prostitution. I'm gonna raise awareness to that by soliciting hookers. So, but anyway, it's just kind of this ass backwards logic that it's illogic. As a matter of fact, it's not logical at all. So, all right. Now, as far as overall, I think the president did an awesome job. I found the debate to be very entertaining. It's one of the things I feel so sorry about with my friends who are kind of trapped in that bubble is they can't really understand and appreciate the humor that Donald Trump brings to the table. The man is hilarious, whether it's intentional or not. But one of the things he did there were two big moves that he made that Joe Biden he baited him into. The first one, but not the biggest, was excuse me. The first one, but not the biggest, to me was fracking. Was making him come out and say, no, we're not going to ban fracking. Now, the moderator did a good job of trying to protect Joe Biden by obfuscating the thesis of the question. She asked the question in a very unnecessarily confusing way. I think it was something along the lines, I'm sorry, I should have it here with me, but I think it was something along the lines of, is fracking, is the idea of banning fracking, is that not an option? It was asked in a negative, so that his answer became a double negative to say that, yes, I am for fracking, while sounding like he was against it. So she tried to protect him that way because if you don't understand, if you got lost in the wording, which is very easy for people to do because they don't pay attention, then it sounds like that he's against fracking. But then he restated his point, which was to his detriment, in my opinion, and saying that I never said that I would ban fracking. Go find that video. This is the man who's saying that Donald Trump's the liar. So I think he kind of opened himself up there, not necessarily just with fracking, but you just told a bald-faced lie on in front of the entire country. So now for the logical people, it would be okay, well, if you lied on that, what else are you lying about? So, and again, if you want to follow those breadcrumbs, they're not even breadcrumbs. They're literally torpedo rolls. It's a giant torpedo roll leading up to a king size hoagie. Okay, but yeah. So that was one of the big strategic moves that the president did. That I was like, okay, that was a good move. The second one was, and probably one of the funniest moments of the night for me personally, was when he asked him if he would ban oil or and slash fossil fuels. He was really talking about oil, but then Joe took it and ran with it. So, and you could tell once again the moderator was trying to protect him because that was asked at the very end of the energy question, and it was a Trump question because the moderator doesn't ask these kinds of questions. She doesn't ask about fracking. She doesn't ask about Hunter. But the one question she asked about Hunter Biden was anything immoral? Was there anything immoral about it? That was a cursory, superficial question. There's so many other things. Sir, what about this email? Sir, what about this message? You know, that she didn't touch, right? They didn't touch the summer of rioting. They didn't touch the Chaz. They didn't touch defunding the police, right? They didn't touch any of these other things. As a matter of fact, they just copied the debate questions from the very first one. It was it was pretty much the same thing. They just redid the first debate without Chris Wallace, which I thought it's very disingenuous. Now, granted, this one was supposed to be about foreign policy. This debate was supposed to be primarily centered around foreign policy. Obviously, they couldn't do that without bringing up Hunter Biden. Obviously, they couldn't do that without bringing up Burisma. Obviously, they couldn't do that without bringing up Hunter Biden's dealings with China. So they decided to scrap the whole thing, and in my opinion, and roll with, let's just rehash the first one because people were mad about it anyway, and nobody will care. So, the questions themselves bothered me. And Donald Trump, I think he learned from Pence that he has to become the moderator that he wishes he had. So I do like that he asked him those questions, and it was such a sucker move for Joe Biden to answer it because, again, especially going back to the point I'm making now about the oil question, the moderator, and I encourage you to go back and, after you hear me say this, go back and watch it and see for yourself. If you can't recall, the moderator, when he asked the oil question, the moderator was actually shutting him down and going to move on to the next question. And when Joe Biden decided to answer, either out of pride, either out of irritation, whatever, you could hear in her voice, it was, as a matter of fact, there was a point in her voice after he said, yes, I would phase out of the oil. You could hear in her voice, she's like, why would you phase out of the oil? But it sounded like she was really saying to him, why did you answer that fucking question? But let me see here. And again, it was a question he did not necessarily have to answer, but he did. And I'm glad he did because it led to probably one of the most hilarious moments of the night for me.
Employed heavily, and they're making a lot of money, more money than they've ever made. So in Russia, to cut back, way back, we saved our oil industry, and now it's very vibrant again.
All right.
And everybody has very inexpensive gasoline. Remember
Vice President Biden, your response, and then we're going to have a final question for both of you.
My response is that those people.
It's a little bit after that.
Industry, yes. Oh, that's transition.
There we are.
Communities.
Okay, I have one final
Would he
question.
close down the oil industry?
It falls.
Would you close
It
down the
falls.
oil industry?
By the way, I would transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I would
that's
transition.
a big statement.
It is a big statement
That's a big
because
statement.
I would stop
Why would you do that?
because the oil industry pollutes.
Why would you do that? No, the real question she was asking was, why did you do that? Why did you answer it? I was about to pull you out of the fire. You didn't have to say anything, but you did. That to me was a big one. And it was hilarious. Oh, that's a big statement. That's a big statement. And then the facials that the president was making. Ooh, that's a big statement. But that was absolutely hilarious. That's vintage Donald Trump right there. But that to me was a very big, 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 big mistake for President Biden. Now, granted, as I'm recording this, a lot of people have already voted. Look, I think for the remaining people, the people that are who are maybe sitting on the fence in some of these states that are rumored to be teetering blue, like Texas, I think this could be a tipping point for the president. So overall, I think it was a great. He did a great job. I think he did a great job. I think it was very entertaining. Certainly more productive than the first time around. I would have liked, again, for him to kind of redirect this racial narrative that the left likes to push. And I think I might get on more on that maybe tomorrow. But overall, I think it was a very productive night in terms of communicating the platforms that both of these candidates are standing on. I think it was a very important night in terms of transparency. Joe Biden kind of exposed himself a little bit there, and I think Donald Trump did a very good job. Even in his demeanor, he was a lot more docile than he normally comes across, which I think was calculated and a good move. So overall, those are my thoughts on the debate. If you disagree, man, then let me know why. Don't tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. Other than that, I'm about to check up out of here. It is time for breakfast and bar rescue. I will check in with you all tomorrow. So until then, peace.